Hi everyone, welcome to CyberPlatter. I am Navya. This is a complete and detailed CISSP review series with emphasis on practical exam tips and the key areas that will be covered in the CISSP exam. Today we are starting with Domain 1 and I will update the description box with the links to the other domains as I upload them. I will also include the in-depth videos on many of the CISSP topics in the description box. So let's get started. Before we get into Domain 1, I want to start with a couple of exam tips. Security is not a one-time process. It is continuous. Think in terms of continuous monitoring, ongoing risk management, and constant improvement. Human safety is the top priority. Assume the role of a manager, not a technician. Most exam answers reflect a high-level strategic view, not hands-on day-to-day fixes. You think like a CISO or senior executive. The manager mindset emphasizes policy, process, strategy, safety, business alignment, and risk. Always follow the proper process. CISSP emphasizes doing things in the correct order. Domain 1, Security and Risk Management. ISC2 Code of Ethics Preamble. The safety and welfare of society and the common good, duty to our principles and to each other requires that we adhere and be seen to adhere to the highest ethical standards of behavior. Therefore, strict adherence to this code is a condition of certificate. ISC2 Code of Ethics Canons protect society, the common good, necessary public trust and confidence, and the infrastructure. Act honorably, honestly, justly, responsibly, and legally. Provide diligent and competent service to principals. Advance and protect the profession. Ethics complaints, who can file? General rule, complaints are accepted only from individuals who claim to be directly injured by the alleged misconduct. Canon specific rules, Canons 1 and 2, complaints may be submitted by any member of the public. Canon 3, complaints may be submitted only by principals, those with an employer or contract relationship with the certificate holder. Canon 4, complaints may be submitted only by other professionals, must be certified or licensed, and subscribe to a professional code of ethics. Cybersecurity approaches, compliance-based. Security is implemented according to required regulations, laws, and industry standards. Ad hoc based, security is implemented without defined criteria or a structured approach. Risk-based, security controls are selected and implemented based on the organization's specific risks. CIA Triad, purpose of CIA to provide a core framework for protecting information and designing security controls. CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality prevents unauthorized disclosure of information, whether due to intentional attacks or human error. All data must be protected at rest, in use, and in transit. Examples of confidentiality requirements: passwords and sensitive fields must be masked. Backups containing sensitive data must be encrypted. Passwords at rest cannot be stored in clear text. PII, PHI must be encrypted with approved algorithms. Logs must not contain sensitive information. Examples of threats to confidentiality: interception of messages, man-in-the-middle attacks, sniffing, eavesdropping, and capturing network traffic. Social engineering, phishing, shoulder surfing, and impersonation. Escalation of privileges, misconfigurations, lost or stolen devices, and third-party vulnerabilities. Examples of confidentiality countermeasures: encryption, network security, physical security, secure disposal, data masking, strong authentication, data classification and labeling access control, awareness training. Integrity prevents unauthorized users from modifying data and stops authorized users from making unauthorized changes. Data must remain accurate, complete, consistent, and trustworthy. Maintains both internal and external consistency. Integrity and confidentiality are interdependent. Examples of integrity requirements: hashing should be used to detect unauthorized changes. Configuration files must be protected from unauthorized edits. Backups must be verified for completeness and accuracy. Firmware and software updates must be signed and validated. Input validation should be used to ensure only authorized, accurate, and properly formatted data is accepted by the system. Examples of threats to integrity: injection attack, data tampering during transmission, human errors, software bugs or errors, improper input validation. Examples of integrity countermeasures: input validation, digital signatures, checksums, hashes, message digests, message authentication code, MAC, cyclic redundancy check, CRC. Version control, access control, error detection. Availability: ensuring that systems, applications, and data are accessible and usable when needed by authorized users. Guarantees that users can reliably access resources without undue delay, disruption, or downtime. Examples of availability requirements: the website must be available 99.95% of the time per month. Backup systems must restore service within 1 hour of failure. Redundant systems must ensure automatic failover during failures. All 500 users must be able to access the system simultaneously without errors. Examples of threats to availability: system failures, hardware crashes, network outages, denial of service or distributed denial of service, that is DOS or DDoS attack. Examples of availability countermeasures: redundancy, fault tolerance, backups, business continuity planning, BCP, disaster recovery, no single points of failure, network rules to prevent DOS or DDoS attacks. Next, authenticity. This ensures that the source of information, a message or a user, is what it claims to be. Prevents impersonation, spoofing, forgery, fraudulent communications, or unauthorized claims. Verifies the identity of users or systems, example through passwords, digital certificates, or biometrics. Confirms the origin of data or messages, example using digital signatures. Non-repudiation provides proof of the origin and delivery of data, ensuring that a sender's system, or user cannot deny having performed a specific action. It is essential for accountability and legal or regulatory compliance. Non-repudiation is achieved through digital signatures, cryptographic techniques, access control mechanisms, session identifiers, or secure logging. Ensures data integrity and authenticity. Protects against disputes by providing verifiable evidence of actions. Exam tip: integrity is equal to data was not altered. Authenticity: Data is from the claimed source. Non-repudiation, the sender cannot deny the action later. CIA triad and DAD, DADS. Confidentiality, the opposite is disclosure. Integrity, the opposite is alteration. Availability, the opposite is destruction. IAAA, identification, uniquely identifying an entity so the system knows who or what is requesting access. Example, entering a username or tapping an ID card. Authentication, validating an entity's claimed identity is valid. Example, entering a password or using a fingerprint. Authorization, granting an authenticated entity only the privileges and permissions to perform specific actions. Example, a nurse accessing patient charts while a receptionist can only view appointment schedules. Accountability, tracing an action back to a specific subject. Example, reviewing audit logs to check who changed system settings. Due diligence and due care. They form the legal and ethical foundation of security governance. Due diligence is the research, investigation, and analysis performed before taking action. It means knowing what should be done to protect the organization. Example, conducting risk assessments, identifying vulnerabilities, reviewing laws and regulations, evaluating security controls, performing audits and gap analysis. Exam tip, due diligence is equal to planning plus investigating. Due care is the action taken after due diligence identifies risks. It means doing what should be done to reduce risk and fulfill security responsibilities. Example, applying patches, implementing security controls, enforcing policies. Exam tip, due care is equal to implementing plus acting. Prudent man rule. It states that an organization and its security professionals must act with the same care, caution, and judgment that a reasonable, prudent person would use in similar circumstances. It sets the standard of due care. It requires organizations to take reasonable steps to protect assets. Failure to follow this rule can result in negligence, liability, or legal consequences. Exam tip, a prudent person does what is reasonable, and this defines due care. Due diligence is equal to think, that is, do maintain. You investigate first, you do your homework. Due care is equal to do protect. You take action based on what you learned. Do the right thing. Finding problems, due diligence, like for example, running a vulnerability scan. Fixing problems, due care, example, patching the system. Prudent man rule is equal to be reasonable. Act like a normal, responsible, careful person would in the same situation. Example, you get requirements, then it goes to research and plan security requirements, that is due diligence. Then implement appropriate security controls, that is due care. And then you maintain controls, that is continuous due diligence. Example, a company gathers data security requirements, that is requirements, analyzes breach risks, that is due diligence, installs encryption and access controls, that is due care, and regularly reviews, tests, and maintains those controls to ensure ongoing protection, that is continuous due diligence. Exam tip: security decisions must hold up legally. All policies, procedures, and controls should withstand legal scrutiny and clearly demonstrate due care and due diligence. Security governance is the framework of leadership, policies, processes, and oversight that ensures an organization's information security supports business goals, manages risks, and meets legal and regulatory requirements. Security governance defines who is responsible for security, how security decisions are made, and how security supports business objectives while controlling risk and meeting legal requirements. Exam tips: security supports the organization's business or mission or strategy, not the other way around. Controls must align with business objectives. You need to avoid solutions that hinder business unless justified by risk. Top-down approach: security is initiated and directed by senior management. This ensures policies, standards, and controls support organizational objectives and risk appetite. It starts with the senior management. Senior management defines and approves the organization security policies and direction. Next, middle management translates these policies into actionable security items and oversees implementation. Next is the staff, implement security controls and comply with security requirements in daily operations. Bottom-up approach starts with technical staff, engineers, administrators, or security practitioners implementing security controls or tools, usually without formal guidance, direction, or approval from senior management. This results in solutions that may address technical issues but do not necessarily align with business goals, risk appetite, or organizational strategy. Exam tip: top-down is always the best practice and right answer. Bottom-up only appears correct in immediate technical action, troubleshooting, or short-term containment of an incident. Exam tip: a solid security plan must align with business objectives and risk management and have senior management's approval and support. Security planning levels: strategic planning done by CISO or senior management, it is long-term. Tactical planning, directors or managers, mid-term. Operational, analysts or engineers, short-term, highly detailed plan. Strategic, CISO or senior management, it is long-term, 3 to 5 years, reviewed and updated annually. It focuses on long-term vision and direction. Examples include human safety, security strategy, risk appetite, risk assessment, reduce liability and risk, business continuity, major budgets. Tactical planning, directors or managers, it is mid-term, 1 or 2 years. This converts strategy into projects and standards. Example, security programs, technology selection, mid-term planning, resource allocation. Operational planning, engineers, analysts or technicians, it is short term. It can be daily, weekly, monthly or quarterly. It is day-to-day execution and procedures. Example, monitoring, patching, backups, incident handling, SOPs. Organizational processes such as purchases, mergers or acquisitions, and sales or divestitures must align with security and business objectives to ensure compliance with organizational policies. Organization roles and responsibilities. CEO, Chief Executive Officer, ultimately responsible for the entire organization, including security and risk acceptance. CFO, Chief Financial Officer, responsible for financial assets, budgeting, and financial impact of security risks. CIO, Chief Information Officer, defines the vision and strategy of IT to support business objectives. Board of Directors and committees make important organizational decisions and handle special tasks. Example, Risk Committee oversees enterprise risk management. CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, defines and governs the organization's overall security strategy, risk management, and compliance at the executive level. Security Manager manages and runs daily security operations, staff, assessments, incidents, and security reporting. ISSO, Information System Security Officer, implements and enforces security controls at the individual system level to ensure policy and standards compliance. Security Analyst detects, analyzes, and responds to security threats and attacks. Security Engineer designs, tests, and implements technical security solutions. Data Administrator, a privileged user who grants access and implements or maintains information systems. Auditor reviews and evaluates compliance with security policies, conduct audits, identify gaps, and report findings to management. Business or mission owner owns business processes or missions and defines system requirements, may overlap with system owner. Asset owner, responsible for the asset or system, making sure it handles sensitive data properly and has appropriate security measures in place. Data roles and responsibilities. Data owner, the individual responsible for classifying information, determining the required level of protection, defining access policies, and ensuring that appropriate security controls are in place for the data. The data owner is ultimately accountable for the data. In most organizations, this responsibility resides with senior management. While the data owner can delegate certain activities, they cannot delegate ultimate accountability or responsibility for the data. Data owners may be held liable for negligence if they fail to perform adequate due diligence in protecting and managing the data for which they are accountable. Data custodian, responsible for implementing and maintaining the technical and operational controls required to protect and manage data according to the classification, access policies, and security requirements defined by the data owner. Data custodian, implementing and maintaining. They focus on the day-to-day management, protection, and technical handling of data. Example, IT administrators, network engineers, backup operators, security analysts. According to GDPR, a data controller determines the purposes and means of processing personal data, decides why the data is processed, that is purpose, and how it is processed, that is means. The controller always retains primary legal responsibility for compliance. A data processor processes personal data on behalf of the data controller. The processor must implement appropriate technical and organizational security measures and follow the controller's instructions. Data steward acts as subject matter expert for specific data and is responsible for the governance, quality, and compliance of data. Responsibilities: ensures data is accurate in the right form and has suitable metadata. Makes sure data can be used appropriately for business purposes. enforces policy compliance and proper usage. Users, people who access data through computer or IT systems, typically to accomplish their work. Example, end users, employees. Data subjects, people whose personal data is being processed by a system or organization. They may or may not interact with the system themselves, but the data being collected, stored, or analyzed is about them. Example, customers, patients, or employees whose information is recorded. A person can be both a user and a data subject. Example, an employer accessing their own payroll record. Social engineering exploits human trust to manipulate victims, uses guilt, empathy, fear, or a sense of responsibility to influence actions. Very effective because it targets human behavior rather than technical systems. Pretexting, a type of social engineering where the attacker creates a fabricated scenario, that is the pretext, to trick a victim into revealing confidential information or performing actions. Example, an attacker calls an employee pretending to be from IT support, asking for their login credentials to fix a system issue. Quid pro quo, it's Latin for something, a type of social engineering where the attacker offers a benefit or service in exchange for information or access. Example, an attacker calls employees offering free software or tech support in exchange for login credentials. Phishing, a social engineering attack where the attacker uses a variety of communication methods such as email, telephone calls, text messages, or fake websites to trick victims into revealing sensitive information or performing unsafe actions. Example, a fake bank message sent by email or SMS asking the user to click a link or enter login credentials. Spear phishing, a targeted phishing attack aimed at a specific person, department, or organization using personalized information. This appears more believable than regular phishing because it uses real names, job roles, or relationships. Example, an email sent to a finance employee that looks like it's from their manager asking for an urgent wire transfer. Whaling, a type of spear phishing that targets senior executives or highly valuable individuals within an organization. Example, a fake urgent email sent to a CEO or CFO requesting immediate approval for a large wire transfer. Vishing, voice phishing, a social engineering attack that uses telephone or voice communication to trick victims into revealing sensitive information or performing actions that compromise security. Spam over internet telephony, SPIT, a social engineering attack that uses VoIP, voice over internet protocol, involving pre-recorded and unsolicited internet phone calls to trick users into revealing sensitive information. Smishing, a social engineering attack that uses text messages, SMS, that is short message service. Spam over instant messaging, SPIM, unsolicited messages sent over instant messaging platforms such as WhatsApp, Teams, or Slack. Shoulder surfing, a social engineering attack where an attacker observes someone's private information over their shoulder. Example, watching someone enter information on a computer, keyboard, ATM, or mobile device to steal passwords, pins, or other sensitive data. Dumpster diving, A social engineering attack where an attacker searches through trash or discarded materials to find confidential information. Why is it effective? Because many organizations discard sensitive information without proper shredding or disposal. Example, retrieving printed spreadsheets, bank statements, or internal memos from trash bins to gain unauthorized access. Tailgating, a physical security breach where an unauthorized person follows closely behind an authorized person to gain access to a restricted area without consent. Example, an attacker slips into a secure building behind an employee who uses their key card. Piggy banking, similar to tailgating, but the unauthorized person gains access with the permission or consent of the authorized person. Example, an employee holds the door open for a visitor who does not have access credentials. Social engineering countermeasures, user awareness and training, educate employees on social engineering tactics and reporting procedures. Access controls, enforce strong authentication, multi-factor access, role-based permissions, identity verification, and physical security measures, example badges, turnstiles, security guards, and cameras, before granting access or sharing sensitive information. Security documents, policies, standards, procedures, mandatory, guidelines, recommendations. Policies, high-level management direction, defines what must be done. Mandatory, approved by senior leadership. Broad and strategic, sets overall security expectations. Policies generally do not change often, but they are reviewed regularly as part of due diligence. Example, all company systems must be protected by strong authentication. Types of policies, issue-specific policy, addresses a specific security issue or topic. Focused on a single area of concern, example, email, internet use, or encryption. Example, employees may not use personal cloud storage for company data without approval. System-specific policy defines security requirements for a specific system, application, or environment. Technical and operational in nature, provides rules and restrictions for access, configuration, and usage of that system. Example, the payroll system must enforce multi-factor authentication for all administrative users. Organizational security policy, high-level enterprise-wide security direction, defines the overall security program and management expectations. Example, information assets must be protected according to the organization's risk management framework. Security policy types, regulatory policy ensures compliance with laws, regulations, or contractual obligations. Example, company financial data must be retained for 7 years to comply with SOX. Advisory policy provides recommended best practices or guidance rather than enforceable rules. Example, employees are encouraged to use strong, unique passwords and change them regularly. Information policy governs the management, classification, and protection of information. Example, access to information is granted based on the principle of least privilege. Standards, specific mandatory controls that support policies, defines rules or requirements that must be met, more detailed than policies but still general enough to apply widely. Example, Passwords must be 14 characters minimum and include complexity requirements. Procedures, step-by-step instructions, defines how to meet the standard and implement the policy. Highly detailed and operational, these are mandatory. Example, a procedure for creating a user account that walks through each step in the identity and access management system. Guidelines, recommended best practices, these are optional, provides flexibility and expert advice. Example, guidelines for secure remote work, use VPN, avoid public Wi-Fi, and so on. Baselines, minimum acceptable security level, provides a consistent starting point for security across systems, ensures that all systems meet at least a minimum set of controls, example, minimum patching level, minimum configuration settings. Often created by using benchmarks such as CIS benchmarks or NIST configuration checklists. Can be customized but never lowered below the required minimum. Example, all Windows servers must meet the CIS Level 1 security configuration baseline. Exam tip, policy, what and why, standard, requirements, baseline, minimum acceptable security level, procedure, how, guideline, suggestions. A formal process must be established for approving any deviations, including waivers or exceptions. Acceptable Use Policy, AUP. A formal security policy that defines how users are allowed and not allowed to use an organization's information systems, networks, and resources. Mandatory for all users. Acknowledged by employees, often signed during onboarding. Key elements include authorized and unauthorized activities, use of company devices and networks, privacy expectations, security requirements, and prohibited behaviors. Example, users must use company computing resources only for authorized business purposes and must not engage in activities that compromise system security. Risk management, the process of identifying, analyzing, evaluating, treating, and continuously monitoring risk to an organization's assets to reduce risk to an acceptable level. Risk is equal to threats coupled with vulnerabilities. Risk is the likelihood that a threat will exploit a vulnerability and cause business impact. Example, there is a risk that a hacker, that is the threat, will exploit the unpatched server, that is the vulnerability, and cause a data breach with financial and legal impact, that is the business impact. A threat is any potential event, action, or actor that can cause harm to an asset. A vulnerability is a weakness or flaw that can be exploited by a threat. A threat alone is not equal to risk. A vulnerability alone is not equal to risk. Both must exist together along with potential impact for risk to exist. Different types of risk response. First one, risk acceptance. Acknowledging the risk and choosing to do nothing, usually because the impact is minor or the cost of mitigation is too high. Example, accepting minor downtime for a non-critical system. Risk mitigation, implementing controls to reduce the likelihood or impact of a risk. Example, installing firewalls, antivirus, or MFA to reduce exposure. Risk assessment or transfer, shifting the risk to a third party who can better manage it. Example, purchasing cyber insurance or outsourcing cloud services. Risk avoidance, eliminating the risk entirely by not engaging in the risky activity. Example, cancelling a project that requires insecure legacy systems. Risk deterrence, discouraging threats from occurring through policies, warnings, or safeguards. Example, posting authorized access only signs or using warning banners in systems. Risk rejection, an unacceptable or improper response is to ignore the risk or refuse to deal with it. Example, ignoring a known vulnerability in a critical system. Exam tip, management is responsible for deciding the appropriate response to each risk and determining how it will be addressed. NIST SP 837 Risk Management Framework RMF for Information Systems and Organizations, a system lifecycle approach for security and privacy. Risk Management Framework RMF, a structured process to manage risk in a repeatable and consistent way. Exam tip, continuous monitoring is critical. RMF is not a one-time process. NIST SP 837 7 RMF steps. First step, prepare, establish context, scope, and risk management strategy. Step 2, categorize, determine system impact levels for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Step 3, select controls, choose baselines. Example, NIST SP 853 provides predefined sets of security and privacy controls based on the system's impact level, like low, moderate, or high, and tailored security controls. Implement controls, deploy security controls in systems, policies, and security procedures. Assess controls, evaluate control effectiveness, and verify they function correctly. Step 6, authorize system. Senior official reviews results and accepts residual risk. Step 7, monitor controls. Continuously monitor system and controls. Update as needed. NIST SP 830 Guide for Conducting Risk Assessments provides guidelines for identifying, assessing, and prioritizing risks to information systems. NIST SP 830 How to Assess Risk. NIST SP 837 How to Manage Risk Continuously across the organization. 8 Guiding Principles of ISO 31000 Risk Management Guidelines. Integrated risk management should be part of all organizational processes. Structured and comprehensive, enables consistent and comparable results. Customized, tailored to the organization's context, objectives, and risk profile. Inclusive, involves stakeholders and consider their perspectives. Dynamic, risks change, management processes should adapt. Best available information, decisions are based on the most reliable and relevant information available at the time, including data, experience, and expert judgment. Human and cultural factors, consider behaviors, perceptions, and organizational culture. Continual improvement, risk management should evolve as the organization grows and learns. COSO, Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, a joint initiative of several professional organizations established to provide guidance on enterprise risk management, ERM, internal control, and fraud deterrence. COSO ERM components, governance and culture, sets organizational tone, risk culture, and ethical values. Strategy and objective setting, aligns risk management with strategy and objectives. performance, identifies and evaluates risks affecting objectives, review and revision, monitors and updates risk responses as conditions change. Information, communication and reporting, this is ongoing, shares timely risk information for decision making. NIST Cybersecurity Framework, a voluntary framework developed to help organizations manage and reduce cybersecurity risks. Three main parts: framework core, implementation tiers, and framework profile. NIST Cybersecurity Framework core, 6 functions: govern, establish governance, policies, oversight, and strategic risk management at the organizational level. Identify, understand and manage assets, systems, data, and cybersecurity risks. Protect, implement safeguards to limit the impact of cybersecurity events. Detect, develop capabilities to identify cybersecurity incidents promptly. Respond, take action to contain and mitigate the impact of incidents. Recover, restore systems, data, and services after a cybersecurity event. NIST Cybersecurity Framework tiers. Tier 1, partial, informal, reactive risk management, not integrated into organizational processes. Tier 2, risk informed. Risk is acknowledged and considered in decisions, but practices are inconsistent. Tier 3, repeatable. Policies, procedures, and practices are formalized and consistently applied. Tier 4, adaptive. Risk management is dynamic, continuously improved, and proactively responsive. NIST Cybersecurity Framework profile. This helps organizations customize and apply the framework core to their specific business needs, risk tolerance, and objectives. Current profile. Example, organization currently has basic access controls, monitoring, and incident response capabilities. Target profile. Example, organization aims to implement advanced threat detection, automated response, and robust recovery plans. Like you can see in the image, first, scope the organizational profile, gather needed information, create the organizational profile, analyze gaps and create an action plan, implement action plan and update profile, and you need to repeat this process again. The difference between current and target profiles identifies gaps and improvement areas. ISO IEC 27001, an international standard that provides a framework for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving an information security management system, ISMS. 3 core principles: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. ISO IEC 27001 clauses. First, scope defines the standard's applicability and boundaries. Normative references lists other standards referenced. Terms and definitions defines key concepts used in the standard. Context of the organization. Understand the organization and its context, stakeholders, and scope of the ISMS. Leadership, top management responsibilities, commitment, information security policies, and roles. Planning, risk assessment, risk treatment, information security objectives, and planning to achieve them. Support, resources, competence, awareness, communication, and documented information. Operation, implementation and operation of risk treatment plans and controls. performance evaluation, monitoring, measurement, analysis, evaluation, internal audit, and management review. Improvement, non-conformity, corrective action, and continual improvement of the ISMS. SABSA, Sherwood Applied Business Security Architecture. It's a business-driven security architecture framework used to design, implement, and govern enterprise cybersecurity in direct alignment with business goals and risks. SABSA helps organizations align security strategy with business objectives, design end-to-end security architecture, ensure governance, risk management, and compliance, prove that security investments support business values. SABSA is a layered model, contextual layer. It provides business view, and the key question here is, why do we need security? Conceptual layer, it provides architecture's view, the answer to the question, what kind of security is needed? Logical, designer's view, how will security work? Physical layer, builder's view, with what systems will the security work? Components, tradesman's view, which tools and technologies? Operational layer, manager's view, how do we run and monitor it? Types of risk. First one, total risk, represents the full exposure an organization faces if no safeguards or controls are in place. Risk is equal to threats coupled with vulnerabilities. Total risk is equal to threats, vulnerabilities, and asset value. Inherent risk is the level of risk naturally present in a system or process before any controls or mitigations are applied. It includes newly discovered risks that have not yet been addressed by risk management strategies. Residual risk is the remaining risk after all possible safeguards and controls have been applied. It represents the risk that the organization chooses to accept or transfer before it cannot be fully eliminated. Risk appetite, the overall level of risk an organization is willing to accept to achieve its objectives. Example, a bank may have a low appetite for fraud risk but higher appetite for innovation-related risks. Risk tolerance, the acceptable variation or limit around that appetite for specific risks. Example, the bank may tolerate up to $10,000 loss per day from minor system errors, but not more. Appetite is equal to how much risk we want to take overall. Tolerance, how much risk we can accept in specific cases. Controls gap, the difference between the current security controls in place and the ideal or required controls needed to adequately mitigate risks. This highlights areas where controls are insufficient or missing, pointing to vulnerabilities that still need attention. For CISSP, this can also be described as the risk reduction achieved when safeguards are implemented. Total risk minus controls gap is equal to residual risk. Exam tip: risk can never be reduced to zero. Risk can never be fully eliminated. The goal is to reach an acceptable level of risk. Risk analysis is the process of identifying, assessing, and prioritizing risks to an organization's assets. Evaluates what could go wrong, how likely it is, and what the impact would be. Enables people and organizations to make informed decisions about risk. An informed decision is one that is based on accurate information, relevant facts, and a careful evaluation of the likelihood and impact of potential threats and vulnerabilities. Next, NIST SP 830 Guide for Conducting Risk Assessments. Step 1. Prepare for the assessment. Define the purpose and scope. Identify assets and data. Establish assumptions and constraints. And select the assessment methodology. Step 2 is to conduct the assessment. First, identify threats. Cyber, example malware or ransomware. Natural threats like floods. Human threats, insider attacks. Obsolescence and threat events. Identify vulnerabilities and predisposing conditions, that is weak systems, misconfigurations, outdated software, poor controls, and risk increasing conditions. Determine likelihood. Estimate how probable it is that a threat exploits a vulnerability and rate it as low, medium, high, or provide a numeric value to it. Determine impacts. Assess financial, operational, reputational, legal, or safety consequences if the threat occurs. Determine risk. That is, risk is equal to likelihood and impact together, which you will finally provide a rating as low, medium, high, or critical. After conducting the assessment, the next step is to communicate results. Prepare a clear risk assessment report with findings and recommendations. Share results with management, security teams, and system owners for informed decisions. Then the next step is to maintain the risk assessment, that is, continuously monitor assets and threats. Update the assessment whenever systems, threats, or vulnerabilities change. Risk analysis has two types. First one is qualitative risk analysis and the other one is quantitative risk analysis. Qualitative risk analysis. This uses descriptive ratings such as high, medium, or low. It is based on subjective judgment, expert opinions, and experience. Often uses a scoring system or risk metrics to compare risks. Pros, that is advantages, simple, fast, works without detailed data. The disadvantages is that it is not precise and it is open to interpretation. Delphi risk analysis. This is a technique commonly used in qualitative risk analysis. It involves a group of experts providing anonymous feedback or survey. Experts review a summary of the group responses, then revise their estimates. The process repeats until consensus is reached. This reduces bias and prevents dominant personalities from influencing results. Quantitative risk analysis. This uses objective numerical data to measure risk. This focuses on dollar values and formulas. Pros, it is precise, supports cost-benefit decisions. Cons, requires reliable data and more effort. What is an asset value? It represents how much it would cost to repair or replace the asset, reflecting its overall worth to the organization. Exposure factor. The percentage of asset value that would be lost if a specific threat event occurred. It represents the degree of damage to an asset from a single incident. Example, if a server worth 100K is expected to lose 40% of its value due to a fire, then the exposure factor is 40%, that is 0.4. Single loss expectancy, SLE. This is the expected monetary loss from a single security incident affecting an asset. It shows how much money you lose each time a specific threat occurs. SLE is equal to asset value combined with exposure factor. Example, if a laptop worth $2,000 would lose 50% of its value in a threat scenario, then SLE is equal to asset value, that is $2,000, into exposure factor, that is 0.5, that is equal to $1,000. So you can expect to lose $1,000 per incident. Annualized rate of occurrence, ARO. This is an estimate of how many times a specific threat is expected to occur within 1 year. It represents the frequency of an incident. Example, if a phishing attack is expected to successfully impact the organization twice per year, then ARO is 2. Another example, if a flood is expected only once in every 10 years, then the ARO is 0.1. Annualized loss expectancy, ALE, the expected yearly financial loss from a specific threat. This helps organizations estimate the cost of risk over time. ALE is equal to SLE into ARO, that is single loss expectancy into annualized rate of occurrence. Let's look at an example of an overall quantitative risk analysis. The first step is to calculate exposure factor. A server worth $100,000 is expected to lose 40% of its value in a fire. So the exposure factor is 40%, that is 0.4. Step 2, calculate SLE, single loss expectancy. SLE is equal to asset value into exposure factor. So SLE will become 100,000 into 0.4, that is 40,000. Next step is to determine ARO, annualized rate of occurrence. So a fire is expected to occur once every 10 years. So ARO is equal to 0.1. These numbers are just examples. Step 4, calculate ALE, annualized loss expectancy. ALE is equal to SLE into ARO, that is 40,000 into 0.1, that is equal to $4,000. So the yearly expected loss from fire damage to this server is $4,000. Safeguard evaluation. This is the process of determining whether a security control is cost effective and appropriate for reducing risk. This compares the cost of implementing the safeguard to the reduction in annualized loss it provides. A safeguard is justified if ALE1 minus ALE2 is greater than ACS, where ALE1 is the loss before the safeguard, ALE2 is the loss after the safeguard, and ACS is the annual cost of the safeguard. Additional considerations for a good safeguard: be an effective security control that actually reduces the targeted risk, not introduce new vulnerabilities, be difficult to bypass, and be transparent to users. Let's see another example. So before implementing safeguard, calculate EF1, that is exposure factor 1. Original expected damage from a fire is 40%. So that is equal to 0.4. Next, calculate SLE1. Asset value is equal to $100,000. So SLE1 is equal to asset value into exposure factor 1, that is 100K into 0.4, that is 40,000. Next, calculate ALE1. So ARO is equal to 0.1, that is a fire is expected to occur once every 10 years. ALE1 is equal to SLE1 into ARO, that is 40,000 into 0.1, $4,000. So after implementing safeguard, a new fire suppression system reduces damage to 10% exposure factor from 40% and costs $1,000 per year. New EF, that is exposure factor after implementing safeguard, is equal to 0.1. And SLE2 is equal to AV into exposure factor 2. AV asset value remains the same, that is 100K into 0.1, that is $10,000. Next, ALE2 is equal to SLE2 into ARO, that is $10,000 into 0.1, that is $1,000. Next is to calculate savings, that is risk reduction. Savings is equal to ALE1 minus ALE2, 4,000 minus 1,000, that is $3,000 saved per year. Next, compare this to safeguard cost. Safeguard annual cost is $1,000, annual savings is $3,000. So the result, the safeguard is cost effective because it saves $3,000 while costing only $1,000. In other words, ALE1 minus ALE2 is greater than ACS, that is annual cost of safeguard. Value or benefit of a safeguard. Value of safeguard is equal to ALE1 minus ALE2 minus ACS. That is ALE1 minus ALE2 is equal to how much loss you avoid, that is your savings. So subtract the ACS to see the net benefit. So ALE1 is equal to 4,000, ALE2 is equal to 1,000, ACS, that is the annual cost of safeguard, is $1,000. So the value is $2,000 net benefit. Next, steps of quantitative risk analysis. First, inventory assets, that is assign asset value. List all critical assets, hardware, software, data, and facilities. Assign a monetary value to each asset. Next, identify threats, that is determine potential threats to each asset, natural disasters, human errors, or attacks. Assign an exposure factor EF for each threat representing the percentage of asset value lost if the threat occurs. Next, calculate SLE, that is single loss expectancy. It is equal to asset value into exposure factor. Then perform threat analysis, that is calculate ALE. Determine annualized rate of occurrence ARO for each threat, that is how often it is expected to occur per year. And then calculate annualized loss expectancy ALE, that is equal to SLE into ARO. Then identify and evaluate countermeasures, that is list possible safeguards for each threat. Assess effectiveness in reducing exposure factor or likelihood of occurrence. Next step, calculate post-safeguard risk, that is estimate new exposure factor, SLE and ALE after applying each safeguard. Then determine risk reduction, that is ALE1 minus ALE2. Then perform cost-benefit analysis, that is compare risk reduction against the annual cost of the safeguard, that is ACS. So a safeguard is justified if ALE1 minus ALE2 is greater than ACS. Then prioritize and implement safeguards, that is implement controls that are cost-effective and high impact. Consider control quality, difficulty to bypass, usability, and transparency. Then the next step is to monitor and review. Continuously monitor risk levels. Risk analysis is not a one-time activity. Remember, risk analysis is not a one-time activity. Reassess asset values, threats, and controls periodically to account for changes. So assign asset value, then calculate exposure factor, then calculate single loss expectancy, which is equal to asset value into exposure factor. Then assess the annualized rate of occurrence, ARO. Then derive the annualized loss expectancy, ALE is equal to SLE into ARO. Then perform cost benefit analysis of countermeasures. Exam tip: just because we can implement a control does not mean we should. Security must be cost effective. So never spend more on safeguards than the value of the asset itself. Exam tip: high value assets get the strongest controls. Focus resources where the business impact is highest. Next, hybrid risk analysis, a risk assessment approach that combines both qualitative and quantitative methods to evaluate risks. Leverages the strengths of both approaches, so it provides a structured numerical perspective while still incorporating expert insights, for example, when data is limited. Loss potential: this is the possible amount of damage or harm that a threat event could cause to an asset. It reflects the severity of the impact if a risk becomes reality. So how much you stand to lose if a threat succeeds. Example: financial loss, operational downtime. Delayed loss: this is the damage that occurs over time, not immediately at the moment of the incident. Examples: long-term reputational harm after a breach and ongoing legal costs. Risk categories describe the type of harm or impact that could occur to an asset. What could happen to the asset? Damage or destruction: physical or logical harm to assets. Example: disk failure, fire, data corruption. Disclosure: unauthorized release of information. Example: data breach, eavesdropping, data leakage. Loss: permanent or temporary loss of availability or value. Example: stolen laptop, deleted data, or lost backups. Interruption: disruption of operations or services. Example: DOS attack, that is denial of service attack. Power outage, system crash. Modification: unauthorized alteration of data or systems. Example: data tampering, malware changing files. Risk factors: the cause or sources that can trigger a risk. Why or how could it happen? Human error, mistakes or omissions, accidental. Misconfigurations, sending data to wrong recipient. Application errors, software flaws or bugs. Example: buffer overflows, input validation failures. Attacks, intentional malicious actions. Example: hacking, malware, phishing, insider attack. Malfunction, equipment or system failure. Example: server crash or storage failure. Physical damage, environmental or physical harm. Example: fire, flood, vandalism, power surge. Control assessment, the formal process of evaluating whether controls are properly designed and implemented and whether they are operating effectively through continuous monitoring to reduce risk. Evaluates whether implemented security and privacy controls meet predefined internal requirements and applicable regulatory or compliance obligations. Two types of control assessments. Security control assessments focus on protecting systems and data. Privacy control assessments focus on protecting personal information. Control assessment planning. Identify controls to be assessed, assessment scope and objectives. Establish measurable criteria for testing each control and clearly define what constitutes successful performance. Select assessment methods: interview, test, examine, or review. Assign roles, schedule, and resources. Document the assessment plan and step-by-step procedure and obtain approval from relevant stakeholders. Communicate the assessment's objectives, scope, and schedule to key stakeholders. Prepare assessment tools and templates to standardize testing and evidence collection. Review dependencies and constraints that may affect the assessment. Control assessment methods. Interview, speaking with personnel to understand processes, responsibilities, and control implementation. Test, performing procedures or transactions to verify that controls operate as intended. Examine or review, inspecting documents, records, or system evidence to confirm compliance and effectiveness. Control assessment. It is important to ensure that only controls within the defined assessment scope are evaluated. Record all observations, test results, and any control deficiencies identified during the assessment. Report the assessment results to senior management and relevant stakeholders for risk reporting and decision making. Track corrective actions for any identified control deficiencies and schedule reassessments as necessary to confirm remediation. Privacy Threshold Analysis, PTA. A threshold analysis is the initial review conducted in privacy control assessment to determine whether a system, project, application, or data activity involves PII and whether a privacy impact assessment PIA is required. So the outcome of this is if PII is involved, no PIA, that is privacy impact assessment, is required and only minimal privacy controls may apply. If PII is involved, then a full PIA, that is privacy impact assessment, must be conducted and privacy controls must be assessed in greater depth. Privacy Impact Assessment, PIA, a comprehensive evaluation required when a system or process handles PII. It analyzes privacy risks and determines whether appropriate controls are in place. Threshold analysis determines whether PII exists and triggers the need for a PIA, while the PIA conducts a detailed privacy control assessment to evaluate the design, implementation, and effectiveness of controls protecting PII. Key considerations for a privacy impact assessment. Types of data collected. Identify all PII and sensitive data handled by the system. Data protection in its 3 states. Protect data at rest, like for example encryption, data in transit, example TLS, SSL or VPNs, and data in use, example memory protection, session controls. Data collection considerations, address purpose, necessity, consent, minimization, notice requirements, and use limitations. Data storage considerations, determine storage location, jurisdiction, retention period, and deletion policy. Data sharing and transfer, review internal sharing, third-party vendors, and cross-border transfer compliance. Access and authorization, ensure only authorized personnel have access and proper role-based controls are applied. Data privacy risks, assess risks like unauthorized access, breaches, non-compliance, and inaccurate or outdated data. NIST SP 800-122 Guide to Protecting the Confidentiality of Personally Identifiable Information, PII. This provides best practices for safeguarding personally identifiable information, PII, throughout its entire life cycle, that is collection, use, storage, sharing, and disposal. NIST SP 800-122. Step 1. Prepare for the security and privacy control assessment, that is, establish the scope and objectives of the assessment by identifying the PII involved, the systems that process it, and the applicable security and privacy requirements. Determine roles, responsibilities, resources, schedules, stakeholders, and assessment boundaries to ensure readiness for evaluating how PII is protected. Step 2. Develop the security and privacy control assessment, that is, create a detailed plan that outlines which controls will be assessed, the assessment methods to be used, the criteria for determining control effectiveness, and the evidence required. Obtain approval for the assessment plan. The plan provides a structured approach for evaluating control design, implementation, and operation. Step 3. Conduct the assessment, that is, perform the assessment using the approved plan by examining documentation, interviewing personnel, and testing controls. Collect evidence to determine whether security and privacy controls for PII are properly designed, correctly implemented, and operating effectively to protect confidentiality. Step 4. Analyze assessment results and report findings, that is, review and analyze assessment results to identify weaknesses, gaps, and residual risks related to PII protection. Document findings in an assessment report, provide risk-based conclusions, and develop recommendations for remediation and improvement. Prepare a remediation plan, recommended mitigation actions, prioritize findings based on severity and associated risk, assign responsibilities, and establish timelines and resource needs. Personal security. Managing personal security ensures that employees, contractors, vendors, consultants, and other third parties do not introduce unnecessary risk to the organization. Controls apply throughout the employment lifecycle, that is, before hiring, during employment, and after termination. Personal security, candidate screening before hiring, job descriptions, clearly defined roles, responsibilities, and security expectations, and required qualifications, skills, and attributes. Background checks or screening, check candidates' criminal, credit, employment, social media, and education history, and ask preliminary questions. Examine CVs, resumes, and cover letters to verify qualifications, experience, and suitability for the role. Screening interviews, live interviews conducted to assess a candidate's qualifications, experience, and trustworthiness before hiring. Reference checks, validate character and previous performance. Employment agreements, legal contracts between the organization and an employee that define terms of employment, responsibilities, and security obligations. Non-disclosure agreements, NDAs. Employee NDAs legally obligate staff to protect confidential information and prevent unauthorized disclosure even after leaving the organization. Non-compete agreement restricts employees from working for competitors or starting competing businesses for a specified period after leaving the organization. Employment contracts include acceptable use, gift policies, conflict of interest policies, expectations, and policy adherence. Personal security during employment. Job rotation reduces fraud, misuse, and increases detection opportunities. Cross-training provides knowledge redundancy and operational resilience. Mandatory vacation helps detect fraud, misuse, or hidden activities. Monitoring and auditing, detect inappropriate behavior or policy violations. Performance evaluation ensures responsibilities, including security, are being followed. Role changes, revalidate access, retrain or rescreen if moved to sensitive positions. Ongoing security training and awareness on policies, threats and responsibilities. Least privilege, give a user only the minimum access or permissions needed to perform their job functions. Separation of duties, splitting tasks among multiple individuals to prevent excessive power, abuse and reduce collusion. Need to know, grant access to information only if it is necessary for the user-specific job tasks. Dual control or two-person rule, both individuals must be present and authorize critical actions. Personal security post-employment, that is termination or separation. Termination policy should clearly define procedures for both voluntary and involuntary separations. Immediate revocation of access, that is network accounts, system access, building badges and keys. Return of organization assets, that is laptops, mobile devices, smart cards, keys, ID cards and documents. Exit interview, reinforce confidentiality obligations, gather organizational feedback. Update access lists, that is remove the user from groups, email lists and privileged access. Shared passwords or access, change or update any shared accounts or credentials the employee had access to. Disable accounts, not delete. This is for forensic or legal review. Final reminders of NDA enforcement even after employment ends. Outsourcing. Outsourcing uses third-party providers for services, but it also introduces risks such as loss of control, data exposure and vendor dependency. Strong contracts, SLAs, audits and access controls are essential. Downstream liability means your organization is still ultimately responsible if a breach occurs, even if the vendor caused it. Your organization also remains responsible for the quality of any outsourced product or service. Offshoring. Offshoring moves operations or data to another country, creating risks around foreign laws, privacy regulations, geopolitical stability, and communication barriers. These risks are managed through compliance checks, encryption, continuous oversight, and strict security requirements, while still retaining ultimate accountability for protecting data and maintaining service quality. Asset. Anything of value to an organization, data, systems, networks, personnel, or physical property that requires protection. Threat. Any potential cause of an unwanted incident that could harm systems, data, or operations. Example, a hacker attempting to steal credit card data, a natural disaster damaging a data center. Threat agent or actor, an entity that carries out or causes a threat event. It is who or what exploits a vulnerability. Example, hackers, flood, power outage, ransomware. Vulnerability, a weakness or flaw in a system, process, or control that can be exploited by a threat. Example, unpatched software, weak passwords, or misconfigured firewalls that can be exploited. Attack surface. All the points, that is hardware, software, interfaces or users where an attacker could try to enter or extract data from a system. Example, public-facing web applications, open network ports, employee email accounts. threat intelligence, information about current or emerging threats that helps an organization anticipate, prevent, or respond to attacks. Example, reports about a new malware targeting point of sale systems or phishing campaigns affecting banks. Tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs. In threat intelligence, TTPs describe how threat actors operate, helping organizations anticipate, detect, and respond to attacks. Tactics, the overall goal or strategy of an attacker, example, data exfiltration, ransomware deployment. Techniques, general methods used to achieve the tactic, example, phishing, exploiting a vulnerability. Procedures, specific detailed steps or tools the attacker uses, example, using mimikatz to steal credentials after gaining access through phishing. Threat modeling, a structured process used to identify, evaluate, and prioritize threats to a system, application, or business process. It can be proactive or reactive. Proactive, conducted during the design or development phase to anticipate potential attacks and build security controls before incidents occur. Reactive can also be applied after a security incident to understand how attacks happened and improve defenses for the future. Threat modeling approaches, attacker focused, looks at potential attackers, their goals, skills, and methods, that is TTPs. Asset focused, starts with valuable assets and identifies threats or vulnerabilities affecting them. System focused, examines system architecture, data flows, and components to find weaknesses. In threat modeling, organizations analyze potential security threats by asking 4 key questions. What are we protecting? That is, identify the critical assets, data, and systems. What can go wrong? That is, determine possible threats, vulnerabilities, and attack scenarios. What are we going to do about it? So here we decide on mitigations, controls, and security measures. Then, did we do a good job? That is, validate that the mitigations are effective and review residual risks. Stride, Microsoft developed software-focused threat modeling framework, but can also be applied to systems in general. Each letter represents a type of threat. S, spoofing, that is pretending to be someone or something else to gain unauthorized access. T, tampering, unauthorized modification of data or system components. R, repudiation, performing actions that cannot be traced, allowing denial of responsibility. I, information disclosure, exposing confidential or sensitive information to unauthorized parties. D, denial of service, interrupting or degrading service availability. E, elevation of privilege, gaining higher access rights than authorized. DREAD, a threat risk assessment model used to quantify and prioritize threats. It evaluates threats based on 5 categories. D, damage potential. How severe would the impact be if the threat is realized? R, reproducibility. How easily can the threat be reproduced by an attacker? E, exploitability. How easy it is to launch the attack. A, affected users. How many users or systems would be impacted? D, discoverability. How easy it is to discover the vulnerability or threat. DREAD assigns numeric values, example 1 to 10 for each category, and calculates a total risk score. DREAD is actually used after identifying threats. Like for example, you have identified threats using STRIDE, then you use DREAD to prioritize which threats to address first. PASTA, Process for Attack Simulation and Threat Analysis, a risk-centric threat modeling methodology that focuses on understanding threats from the attacker's perspective while aligning with business objectives. PASTA steps. First is to define objectives, that is, identify business and security goals. Define technical scope, that is, map systems, applications, and assets. Decompose applications or processes, that is, to understand workflows and data flows. Then threat analysis, identify threats relevant to assets and processes. Vulnerability analysis, examine system weaknesses. Attack modeling and simulation, predict potential attack paths and techniques. Risk and impact analysis, prioritize risks and define mitigation strategies. VAST, that is Visual, Agile and Simple Threat. Visual uses diagrams to represent threats, attack surfaces and workflows for clarity. Agile friendly integrates with Agile and DevOps practices, allowing continuous threat assessment during development. Simple, designed to be easy to understand and implement across teams, not just for security specialists. Scalable, supports enterprise-wide adoption, covering multiple applications, teams, and processes. Note, generally, diagrams are used to illustrate and analyze threats and attacks. In a threat modeling or data flow diagram, the key elements to mark include trust boundaries, that is, locations where the security level changes or where data moves between different levels of trust. Processes, activities or functions that handle or transform data. Data stores, places where data is kept, such as databases, files, or data repositories. External entities or input points, that is, users, systems, or third parties that interact with the system. Data flow, how information moves between processes, data stores, and external entities. Privileged operations, actions that require higher permissions than a normal user account. Security notes, that is, annotations that describe security policies, assumptions, or controls associated with components. Trike, defining acceptable and unacceptable risk levels for assets, using a requirements-driven approach to identify threats and evaluate potential mitigations. Assigning risk scores to threats based on likelihood and impact, ensuring that controls reduce risk to stakeholder acceptable levels. Octave, operationally critical threat, asset and vulnerability evaluation. Risk-based, asset-centric, self-directed, organizational and process-focused. So steps, establish drivers, that is, define risk measurement criteria that guide the assessment. Profile assets, that is, develop an information asset profile and identify where assets are stored, that is, asset containers. Identify threats, determine areas of concern and create potential threat scenarios. Identify and mitigate risk, that is, identify and analyze risks, then select appropriate mitigation strategies. NIST SP 800-154, Guide to Data-Centric System Threat Modeling. First step, identify and categorize the system and data of interest, that is, define scope, assets, and data flows. Step 2, identify and select the attack vectors, determine which attack paths and threat scenarios to include in the model. Step 3, categorize security controls, document existing or planned controls that mitigate the identified attack vectors. Step 4, analyze the threat model, evaluate risks, threats, control effectiveness, and residual threats to prioritize mitigation efforts. COBIT, it stands for Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology. It is a control framework for employing information security governance best practices within an organization. It has 34 IT processes. It provides guidance to auditors for assessing and evaluating IT governance, controls, and compliance. COBIT is aligned with COSO so that IT governance fits into enterprise internal control frameworks. 5 principles of COBIT. First one, meeting stakeholder needs, that is, align IT goals with business goals and deliver value while balancing risk and resources. Covering the enterprise end to end. This applies to the entire organization, not just the IT department. Applying a single integrated framework, COBIT integrates with other standards like COSO, ITIL, ISO, TOGAF. Enabling a holistic approach, governance is supported by multiple enablers, that is processes, people, culture, information, and so on. Separating governance from management. Governance is evaluate, direct, monitor, EDM, management, plan, build, run, monitor. ISO IEC 27002, Information Security, Cybersecurity and Privacy Protection, Information Security Controls. An international standard that provides guidance on information security controls. ISO 27001 defines what you must do, that is requirements for an ISMS. ISO 27002 tells you how to do it, that is detailed controls guidance. Example, 27001 says you must control access. 27002 explains how to implement access control. ISO 27001 is the mandatory certifiable framework for an ISMS. ISO 27002 is the practical guide that explains how to implement its security controls. NIST SP 853, Security and Privacy Controls for Information Systems and Organizations. It provides a comprehensive catalog for security and privacy controls for federal information systems in the US. It organizes controls into control families, each targeting specific aspects of security and privacy, such as access control, awareness and training, audit and accountability, identification and authentication. NIST SP 853 control selection steps. First, categorize the system based on confidentiality, integrity and availability, FIPS 199. Select baseline controls according to the system's impact level, low, moderate, high. Tailor controls by adding, modifying or removing as per organizational needs. Document control selection in a formal security plan or report. Implement controls across systems, processes, and policies. Assess controls to ensure they are effective and functioning correctly. Security controls. Security controls are measures used to protect assets and reduce risk. Within security controls, two important types are safeguards and countermeasures, which address threats in different ways. Safeguards, they are proactive measures put in place to prevent security incidents before they occur. They aim to reduce the chance that a threat can exploit a vulnerability. Examples, firewalls, access restrictions, encryption. Countermeasures. These are reactive measures used after a threat has been detected or an incident has occurred. They minimize impact, contain damage, and support recovery. Examples: incident response actions or applying patches. Controls based on implementation describe how a control is applied. Physical controls protect the physical environment and prevent unauthorized physical access. Example: locks, fences, guards, that is security guards, CCTV. Technical or logical controls use technology to enforce security. Example: firewalls, authentication, encryption, IDS. Administrative controls: policies, procedures, and management activities that guide security behavior. Controls based on functionality describe what the control does. Deterrent controls discourage bad behavior or attacks before they happen. Example: warning signs, visible cameras. Preventive controls stop unwanted actions from happening. Example: locks, firewalls, passwords. Detective controls spot or alert when something goes wrong. Example: locks, monitoring systems, alarms. Corrective controls fix problems and bring systems back to normal. Example: patches, removing malware. Recovery controls, a continuation or extension of corrective controls that focus on fully restoring operations, data, and services after major disruptions or failures. Example: backups, disaster recovery. Compensating controls provide alternative options to existing controls when the primary controls cannot be implemented or need extra support to ensure security. Example: extra monitoring when MFA, that is multi-factor authentication, is not available. Directive controls guide or tell users how to act securely, that is encourage correct behavior or establish expected practices. Example: policies, instructions, procedures. Many security controls can fall into multiple categories. Example: CCTV cameras. They are physical controls. They protect premises from unauthorized access. Deterrent control. Visible cameras discourage intruders. Detective control helps identify security incidents after they occur. Continuous monitoring or improvement is the practice of regularly evaluating security controls, measuring their effectiveness, identifying gaps, and optimizing processes over time. Together, these directly drive strong risk management and an improved security posture. NIST SP 800-137 Information Security Continuous Monitoring for Federal Information Systems and Organizations. ISO IEC 27004 Information Security Management, Monitoring, Measurement, Analysis and Evaluation. NIST SP 800-137 Information Security Continuous Monitoring explains how organizations should continuously monitor their security controls, threats, and vulnerabilities so they always have real-time awareness of their risk and security posture instead of relying on one-time security assessments. The 6 core steps of NIST SP 800-137 ISCM process. First is to define the strategy by deciding what to monitor, how often to monitor, and its criticality while aligning with business objectives and risk tolerance. Second, establish the program by selecting security controls, defining metrics, KPIs, KRIs, and assigning roles. Step 3. Implement ISCM using automated security tools, scanners, log monitoring, and configuration management. Step 4. Analyze data and report findings on vulnerabilities, threats, and control performance to security teams, risk owners, and senior management. Step 5. Respond to findings by remediating, mitigating, accepting, or escalating risks. Step 6. Review and improve continuously by updating monitoring strategy, metrics, and controls while enhancing automation, detection speed, and risk visibility. Risk maturity model. This measures how well an organization manages risk over time, from informal to fully optimized. It answers how mature is our risk program today? What must we improve next? Are our controls effective or just documented? Risk maturity model is directly tied to continuous improvement because they define a current state, a target future state, and a roadmap for improvement. This is an example of risk maturity model compliance report. Typical risk maturity levels. Level 0 or 1, initial or ad hoc, that is no formal risk process. Level 2, repeatable, basic risk processes exist. Level 3, defined, that is documented and standardized. Level 4, managed, risk is measured and monitored. Level 5, optimized, automated, predictive, and continually improving. Types of law. Criminal law defines actions considered offenses against the state or society. Violations can result in fines, imprisonment, or other criminal penalties. Cybersecurity relevance. Hacking, identity theft, fraud, malware distribution. Chain of custody is critical here. Evidence must be admissible in court. Example, collected under proper procedure, documented, and preserved integrity. Common law or case law. This is based on judicial decisions and legal precedents rather than written statutes. Courts interpret laws in specific cases, which can influence cybersecurity liability and negligence rulings. Civil law. This covers disputes between individuals or organizations, usually result in monetary compensation rather than criminal punishment. Standard of proof is preponderance of evidence, that is more likely than not. It should be greater than 50% likelihood. The standard of proof in civil law is lower than criminal law. That is, in criminal law, it is beyond a reasonable doubt. Subtypes in civil law: contract law, tort law, property or real estate law, employment or labor law, and family law. Civil law subtype contract law. It deals with breaches of agreements such as SLAs, NDAs, software licenses, or service contracts, which are especially important in cybersecurity contexts. Cybersecurity relevance: data breaches, negligence claims, failure to meet contractual obligations. Tort law. This deals with harm or injury caused to someone, usually resulting in compensation. Example, negligence, privacy violations, or defamation. Next is administrative or regulatory law. This ensures compliance with laws, regulations, or government mandates. It is created and enforced by government agencies or regulatory bodies. Non-compliance can lead to fines, penalties, sanctions, or mandated corrective actions or operational restrictions. Typical triggers: GDPR, HIPAA, or SOX violations. International law. This governs actions across national borders and between nations. Cybersecurity relevance. cyber crime treaties, cross-border data protection laws, international sanctions, and agreements on cyber warfare. Internal administrative investigations ensure internal policies, procedures, and organizational rules are followed. Typical triggers: employee misconduct, policy violations, example data access or acceptable use, conducted internally by HR, compliance, or IT security teams. These investigations focus on policy enforcement, not legal prosecution. Outcomes can include disciplinary actions, retraining, or termination. Industry standards investigations verify adherence to industry-specific best practices or frameworks. Typical triggers: ISO 27001 audits, PCI DSS Compliance, NIST Cybersecurity Framework adoption. May be required for certifications, contracts, or client assurance. They do not result in government fines or criminal penalties, but can lead to contractual penalties, loss of certification, increased fees, or loss of business. Cyber crime: any criminal activity that involves a computer, network, or digital device as the target, tool, or both. It involves both technical attacks and social manipulations, and it can target individuals, organizations, or governments. Attackers, hackers, or crackers: skilled individuals who exploit vulnerabilities to steal, disrupt, or damage systems. Script kiddies: less skilled attackers who use pre-written scripts or tools to carry out attacks without deep technical knowledge. Malicious insiders: threats that come from people within the organization, employees, contractors, or business partners who misuse their access to harm systems, steal data, or cause disruptions. Exam tip: insider threats are dangerous because they already have authorized access, making detection and prevention more challenging. State-sponsored actors operate on behalf of governments for espionage, sabotage, or cyber warfare. Hacktivists: politically, ideologically, or socially motivated actors targeting organizations for publicity or protest. Active attacks involve direct attempts to alter, disrupt, or damage systems or data. Example: man-in-the-middle attacks, data modification, DOS attacks, malware injection. Passive attacks involve monitoring or eavesdropping on systems or communications without altering them. Example: traffic analysis, sniffing network packets, shoulder surfing. Distributed denial of service attack, DDoS. It is an attack where multiple systems overwhelm a target with traffic, making it unavailable to legitimate users. Target can be a server, network, or service. Attackers often use botnets. Those are networks of compromised computers to generate massive traffic. DDoS attacks disrupt availability. DNS poisoning or DNS spoofing: an attack where false DNS records are inserted into a DNS server or cache, causing users to be redirected to malicious websites instead of the legitimate ones. Legitimate domain names are falsely mapped to malicious IP addresses. Zero-day attack: this happens when attackers exploit a software vulnerability that is unknown to the vendor and users so that no patch or fix exists yet. It is especially dangerous because defenders have 0 days to prepare, making detection and prevention very difficult. Exam tip: 0 day is equal to unknown flaw plus no patch plus high risk. Doxing: The act of collecting and publicly releasing someone's private identifying information without their consent, usually with malicious intent. Website defacement. A hacker illegally gains access to a website and then changes its content without permission. It's essentially digital vandalism. This often includes altering the homepage to display political messages, profanity or hate speech, threats, a hacker's nickname or calling card, or fake warnings and propaganda. Computer Fraud and Abuse Act (CFAA), the main US anti-hacking law covering unauthorized access, exceeding authorized access, password trafficking, malware distribution, and system damage. Unauthorized access is accessing a computer without any permission. Exceeding authorized access is you have credentials but you use them improperly. CFAA covers nearly all computers today. NIPA, that is National Information Infrastructure Protection Act. This is an update or extension that broadens coverage and strengthens penalties, especially for internet connected and critical infrastructure systems. Federal Sentencing Guidelines. This provides a framework for determining penalties for organizations that commit federal crimes, including cybersecurity, privacy, and compliance failures. This is used by federal court judges to help determine appropriate penalties when an organization is found guilty of a federal offense. FISMA, that is Federal Information Security Management Act. So FISMA requires federal agencies and contractors to implement NIST-based information security programs, including system categorization, security controls, continuous monitoring, and annual reporting. Note, FISMA and FedRAMP both use NIST controls. FISMA is equal to federal agencies plus contractors. FedRAMP is equal to cloud service providers used by federal agencies. Intellectual property is any creation of the human mind or intellect, like ideas, inventions, designs, or artistic works. Example, creative works like songs, books, articles, paintings, sculptures. Branding and marketing, logos, catchphrases, partial slogans, inventions and designs, recipes, formulas, machine designs, smartphone designs. Software and technology like programs, code, algorithms. Business secrets like trade secrets and proprietary processes. Intellectual property, that is IP laws. First one is copyright. This protects original creative works, that is books, music, movies, painting, software, digital content. This gives the creator exclusive rights to reproduce, distribute, display, and create derivative works. Typically lasts for the lifetime of the author plus 70 years. Digital protections include DRM, Digital Rights Management, and Anti-Circumvention DMCA. DMCA, that is Digital Millennium Copyright Act. This strengthens copyright protections for digital content and addresses modern technology, internet distribution, and circumvention of protections such as DRM, that is Digital Rights Management, Encryption, and other TPMs. It covers media like music, movies, video games, software, ebooks, and digital images, as well as streaming content and software protection mechanisms. Essentially, it safeguards both the digital content and the tools that prevent unauthorized copying or access. Intellectual property IP laws, trademarks, protect unique brand identifiers like names, logos, slogans, and symbols. It prevents others from using confusingly similar marks. It helps consumers identify the source of goods and services. Intellectual property laws, patents, protect inventions. They grant the inventor exclusive rights to make, sell, or license for a limited time. Typically used for software algorithms, devices, or hardware components. Intellectual property laws, trade secrets, protect secret, confidential business information that gives a competitive advantage. Example, formulas, processes, source code, customer lists, recipe ingredients. Licensing, this is a legal agreement that allows someone to use intellectual property under specific terms without transferring ownership. It commonly applies to software, patents, trademarks, and copyrighted works. Contractual license, explicit license between the software owner and user. It defines scope, restrictions, and responsibilities. Shrink wrap license, license terms inside the product packaging. Agreement is accepted when the user opens the package, common for boxed software. Click-through or EULA, that is End User License Agreements. This is the license presented digitally during installation or first use. User accepts by clicking I agree, common for downloaded software. Cloud services or SaaS licensing, subscription-based license for software accessed online. Terms often include number of users, usage limits, and service levels. Example, Microsoft 365, Salesforce. Perpetual license, one-time purchase allowing indefinite use of software, typically limited to a specific version. Upgrades may require additional fees. Creative Commons license. This allows creators to grant public permissions for use of their work under defined conditions. This is free to apply and free to use, but users must follow the license conditions. Corporate espionage, the secret and illegal theft of a company's confidential information for competitive advantage. WIPO, that is World Intellectual Property Organization, provides technical assistance and guidance to countries for developing and managing intellectual property systems. WTO, World Trade Organization, offers a structural legal framework to ensure protection and enforcement of intellectual property internationally. Import-export control, that is the export-import regulations and laws that a country uses to manage the flow of goods, services, and technology across its borders. Wassenaar Arrangement, an international agreement controlling the export of arms and dual-use technologies. Dual-use technologies are items with both civilian and military applications. So, Wassenaar Arrangement is an international agreement controlling the export of arms and dual-use technologies to prevent them from being used maliciously. They prevent them from being acquired by terrorists or hostile states, members over 40 countries. Telecommunications category, advanced telecom equipment and systems that could be used for military or intelligence purposes are controlled for export. Information security or cryptography category, focus on cryptographic hardware, software, and key management. These are restricted for export to prevent misuse by adversaries or terrorists. Transborder data flow. This is the movement of data across national borders, which must comply with the legal and regulatory requirements of all countries involved. Data localization is the requirement that data about a country's citizens or operations be stored and processed within that country. Exam tip: when handling transborder data, always ensure legal compliance in every country where the data is stored, transmitted, or processed. Encryption export controls are laws and regulations that restrict the export, import, or transfer of encryption technology to foreign countries. US organizations exporting software or hardware with encryption must comply with ITAR or ER. ITAR, that is International Traffic in Arms Regulations, controls defense-related encryption and military-grade technology, requires government approval for export. Then there is Export Administration Regulation. This controls commercial encryption products. It includes software, hardware, and cryptographic algorithms. Export may require a license depending on encryption strength and destination. Computer export controls prohibit exports of sensitive technology to sanctioned or restricted countries such as North Korea, Iran, Sudan, Cuba, and Syria. Next, let's cover privacy laws. In the US, privacy is protected through laws and regulations, and the Fourth Amendment prevents the government from conducting unreasonable searches and seizures without probable cause or a warrant. US privacy laws include HIPAA, HITECH, GLBA, COPA, ECPA, and CALEA. HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, applies to healthcare providers, insurers, and business associates. Protects PHI, that is Protected Health Information. Privacy rule governs the proper use and disclosure of protected health information, that is PHI. Security rule mandates technical, administrative, and physical safeguards to protect PHI. Breach notification rule requires organizations to notify affected individuals and authorities when PHI is compromised. High-tech, health information technology for economic and clinical health. It strengthens HIPAA privacy and security protections, promotes the adoption and meaningful use of electronic health records, EHRs, emphasizes security of electronic PHI, that is ePHI. GINA, that is Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, US law that prohibits discrimination based on genetic information in health insurance and employment. It ensures privacy of genetic information collected by employers and insurers. Federal Trade Commission Act, FTC Act, US law prohibiting unfair or deceptive business practices, including misleading statements about privacy or security. It requires protection of consumer information, including personally identifiable information, that is PII. ECPA, Electronic Communications Privacy Act, protects electronic communications from unauthorized interception, access, and disclosure. Applies to network monitoring, lawful interception, and employee monitoring policies. Key components: Wiretap Act prohibits intercepting electronic communications in transit without consent or legal authorization. Stored Communications Act, SCA, protects stored electronic communications and regulates government or third-party access. Pen registers or trap and trace provisions control the collection of dialing, routing, or addressing information with legal authorization. GLBA applies to financial institutions, protects NPI, that is non-public personal information. It requires privacy notices to inform customers how their information is collected, used, and shared, safeguarding customer information, limits on sharing data without consumer consent. SOX, US law that protects investors by ensuring corporate financial accountability, accurate reporting, and security of financial data. This requires controls over financial data, including electronic records, to prevent accounting fraud and ensure integrity. It relies on COSO's internal control integrated framework as the standard for evaluating and reporting on internal controls over financial reporting. Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard PCI DSS, a set of security standards that protects cardholder data and ensures secure handling of credit and debit card transactions. It prevents theft or fraud of payment cards. Applies to all organizations that store, process, or transmit payment card information. PCI DSS is not a law or government regulation. It is an industry standard created by the major credit card companies. Compliance is required by the payment card companies through contractual obligations with merchants and service providers. Non-compliance can lead to fines or loss of processing privileges. PCI DSS, Cardholder Data Environments, CDE, all people, processes, and technologies that store, process, or transmit cardholder data or sensitive authentication data fall under CDE. Example, payment terminals, POS systems, payment servers, databases storing card numbers, payment applications, network segments that carry card data, backup systems that store card data, or logs that contain PANs. Cardholder data, any information that identifies a payment card and its holder. It includes primary account number, that is PAN. It is a 16-digit card number. It includes cardholder name, expiration date, and service code. Sensitive authentication data is security critical information used for authentication during a transaction. Includes full track data, magnetic stripe or chips, card verification code, CVV, CVC, CID, 3 to 4 digit code, pins and pin blocks. Cardholder data can be stored securely, but sensitive authentication data must never be stored. 12 PCI DSS requirements. First one, install and maintain a firewall configuration to protect cardholder data. Do not use vendor-supplied defaults for system passwords and other security parameters. Protect stored cardholder data. Encrypt transmission of cardholder data across open public networks. Protect all systems against malware and regularly update antivirus software or programs. Develop and maintain secure systems and applications. Restrict access to cardholder data by business need to know. Identify and authenticate access to system components. Restrict physical access to cardholder data. Track and monitor all access to network resources and cardholder data. Regularly test security systems and processes. Maintain a policy that addresses information security for employees and contractors. PCI DSS Report on Compliance ROC, the formal assessment report produced by a qualified security assessor QSA to document an entity's full compliance with the PCI DSS. Must accompany an attestation of compliance AOC. required annually for entities processing large volumes of cardholder data, typically level 1 merchants and service providers. Ensures a consistent level of reporting to banks and payment brands. PCI DSS Self-Assessment Questionnaire SAQ, a self-validation tool for SAQ eligible merchants and service providers that do not require a full ROC. This is to assess their own PCI DSS compliance. PCI DSS merchant levels. Merchant level 1 greater than 6 million transactions per year. Annual report on compliance, that is ROC, is required annually. Merchant level 2, 3 and 4, for them annual self-assessment questionnaire SAQ is sufficient. Merchant level 2, 1 to 6 million transactions per year. Merchant level 3, 20,000 to 1 million transactions per year. Merchant level 4, less than 20,000 transactions per year. 4 ongoing steps to protecting payment account data with PCI DSS. First one, assess, that is to identify and understand all aspects of the payment environment by mapping all locations where payment account data is stored, processed or transmitted. Taking inventory of all IT assets and business processes involved in payment processing. Analyzing systems and workflows for vulnerabilities that could expose payment account data. Implementing or updating controls to meet PCI DSS requirements, and then completing a formal PCI DSS assessment, example SAQ or QSA-led assessment. Second step is remediate. So resolve weaknesses and strengthen the security posture by identifying and addressing gaps in security controls, fixing vulnerabilities uncovered during assessment activities, removing unnecessary storage of payment account data, and implementing secure business processes across the organization. Step 4, report. Ensure proper documentation and communication by documenting assessment activities and remediation results, preparing the required compliance artifacts like SAQ, AOC or ROC, submitting compliance reports to the entity responsible for accepting them, typically an acquiring bank or payment brand. Step 4, monitor and maintain. Keep security controls effective throughout the year by continuously monitoring and validating the operation of security controls, maintaining policies, procedures, logs, and ongoing vulnerability management, ensuring that business as usual processes support continuous compliance and protection of payment account data. PCI DSS testing methods. Examine. The assessor critically reviews evidence, that is documents, screenshots, configurations, logs and data files to verify that required controls exist and are implemented. Next, observe. The assessor watches actions or system behaviors such as personnel performing tasks, systems responding to input, or physical or environmental controls to confirm they operate as intended. Interview. The assessor speaks with personnel to confirm activities are performed, understand how tasks are carried out, and evaluate their knowledge of required processes. COPA, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, applies to websites and online services collecting data from children under 13, requires parental consent, data protection, clear privacy policies. Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act requires telecommunications and internet service providers to design networks to allow lawful court-authorized surveillance while preserving network security. GDPR is the EU regulation that enforces strict protection of personal data, giving individuals control over their data and requiring organizations to implement strong privacy and security practices. This applies to organizations within the EU or any organization outside the EU processing EU residents' personal information. Breaches must be reported within 72 hours. Non-compliance can result in fines up to 20 million euros or 4% of global annual revenue, whichever is higher. GDPR restricts the transfer of personal data outside the EU to ensure that the data continues to receive an adequate level of protection. First came the safe harbor. It was in 2000 and then it was invalidated in 2015. Safe harbor was replaced by Privacy Shield in 2016. Privacy Shield was again invalidated in 2020. Then GDPR in 2018 governs transfers under new rules. GDPR data subject rights: right to be informed, know how your data is collected, used and shared. Right of access: request a copy of your personal data from an organization. Right to rectification: correct inaccurate or incomplete personal data. Right to erasure or a right to be forgotten: request deletion of personal data under certain conditions. Right to restrict processing: limit how an organization uses your data, example while disputing accuracy. Right to data portability: receive your data in a structured, machine-readable format and transfer it to another controller. Right to object to processing based on legitimate interests, marketing or research. Rights related to automated decision making and profiling: protect against decisions made solely by automated systems that significantly affect you. California Consumer Privacy Act CCPA, a state privacy law that gives California residents rights over their personal information and imposes obligations on businesses that collect or process that data. Under CCPA, a business must comply if it does business in California and collects personal data of California residents and meets one or more thresholds like annual gross revenue greater than $25 million, buys, sells, shares PI of 100,000 plus consumers or households, derives greater than or equal to 50% of revenue from selling or sharing PI, that is personal information. CCPA core consumer rights: right to know, that is what personal data is collected, why it is collected and who it is collected or sold to. Right to delete, request deletion of personal data with exceptions. Right to opt out of the sale or sharing of personal data, requires do not sell or share my personal information link. Right to non-discrimination, that is no denial of service or higher prices for exercising CCPA rights. Right to correct, right to limit use of sensitive PI. Note that GDPR is opt-in, CCPA is opt-out. Then there is Personal Information Protection Law in China and there is Protection of Personal Information Act in South Africa. Business Continuity Planning, BCP, a strategic process that organizations use to ensure that critical business functions can continue during and after a disruption, such as natural disasters, cyber attacks, power outages, or pandemics. BCP main components, business impact analysis, BIA, risk assessment, strategy development, provisions and processes, plan development or documentation, plan approval, plan implementation, training and education, testing and exercises, maintenance and review. NIST 834 Continuity Planning Guide for Federal Information Systems, ISO 22301 Security and Resilience Business Continuity Management Systems Requirements, FFIEC Handbooks, that is Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council, FINRA Rule 4370, Business Continuity Plans and Emergency Contact Information for Financial Institutions. COBIT integrates BCP and IT continuity. ISO 22317, Business Continuity, Business Impact Analysis, BIA Guidelines. NIST 834 Continuity Planning Guide. Develop the contingency planning policy, define scope, objectives, and obtain management support. Conduct the business impact analysis, BIA, identify critical functions, dependencies, and potential impacts of disruption. Identify preventive controls, determine safeguards to reduce risks to critical functions, example fire suppression systems, redundant servers, access controls. Create contingency or recovery strategies, define methods to restore critical operations within acceptable downtime, example backup data restoration, alternate work sites, cloud failover. Develop the IT contingency plan, document procedures for response, recovery, and resumption of operations. Test, train, and exercise. Verify plan effectiveness and train staff for continuity roles. Seventh, maintain the plan. Establish a process for regular updates, reviews, and plan improvements. BCP plan components, inventory of critical assets, systems, applications, data, and resources required to keep the business running. Clear conditions for declaring a disaster, example outage beyond RTO, unsafe facility, data loss. Who is authorized to declare a disaster and activate the plan? Key internal contacts, vendors, emergency responders, and escalation paths. Step-by-step tasks for response, continuity, and recovery, that is what to do immediately and who does it. How and what to communicate to staff, customers, vendors, and media. Instructions to restore systems, resume operations, and return to normal. Business impact analysis, BIA, identify critical functions, identify and evaluate the potential effects of disruptions to critical business functions and processes, prioritize recovery efforts and resources. NIST SP 834 BIA process. First, determine mission or business processes and impact of disruption. That is, map system functions to organizational mission or business processes. Evaluate outage impacts, that is, financial loss, safety risk, legal implications, customer dissatisfaction. And then estimate maximum tolerable downtime, MTD, recovery time objective, RTO, and recovery point objective, RPO. Step 2, identify resource requirements. Determine what resources are required to resume processes after a disruption. List all resources needed for recovery, such as facilities, that is offices, data centers, alternate sites, personnel, staff, contractors, specialists, equipment, computers, servers, network devices, software and applications, data files and databases, system components, hardware network communications, vital records, documents, backups, logs. Identify interdependencies between processes and resources to avoid bottlenecks during recovery. Step 3 is to identify recovery priorities for system resources, that is, establish which system resources should be recovered first to support critical business processes. Link resources to their associated mission or business processes. Determine priority levels for recovery, ensuring the most critical functions are restored first. Develop recovery sequences for resources and activities based on criticality and dependencies. Next is maximum tolerable downtime, that is MTD. The longest period a business process or system can be unavailable before causing unacceptable impact to the organization. This determines how quickly recovery must occur to avoid severe operational, financial, or legal consequences. Recovery time objective, RTO. This is the target time to restore a business process or system after a disruption. Remember that RTO should be less than or equal to MTD. Then there is recovery point objective, RPO. This is the maximum acceptable amount of data loss measured in time. RPO should be less than or equal to RTO. Let's look at an example. MTD 4 hours. Critical patient care cannot be safely maintained if the system is down longer than 4 hours. RTO 1 hour. IT aims to restore the system within 1 hour to minimize disruption to patient care. RPO 15 minutes. Backups or replication are configured so that no more than 15 minutes of patient data is lost. Exam tip. Backups are a recovery control and their location is critical for regulatory compliance since jurisdiction affects requirements. Backup type, full backup, copies all selected data every time a backup is performed. Advantages, fastest and easiest to restore because everything is in one set. Cons, it is time consuming to perform, requires the most storage space. Full backup is usually done weekly or at major milestones. Backup type differential backup. This backs up only the data that has changed since the last full backup. Advantages, it is faster than full backup process because less data to copy, and it is easier to restore than incremental backup because only need the last full backup and latest differential backup. Cons, growing size over time, slower than incremental to perform as more time passes after the last full backup. It is often done daily between weekly full backups. Backup type incremental backup. This backs up only the data that has changed since the last backup, whether it is full or incremental. Advantages, faster to perform and uses the least storage. It is efficient for frequent backups. Cons, restoration is slower because you need the last full backup plus all incremental backups since then. It is more complex to manage because if one incremental is corrupted, recovery is affected. Incremental backup is often used multiple times per day for critical systems. For full backup, everything is backed up. Differential, only change since last full backup is backed up. For incremental, only changed since last backup, either full or incremental is backed up. Restoration time is fast in full backup, medium in differential, slowest in incremental. Backup time is slow in full backup, medium in differential, and fast in incremental. Storage needed is high in full backup, medium in differential, and low in incremental. Examples of full backup: weekly full backup. So differential is done daily or hourly incremental backup. Supply chain risk management, SCRM, the process of identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks associated with the supply chain, including suppliers, vendors, contractors, and third-party service providers. The goal is to ensure that products, services, and information remain secure, reliable, and available throughout the chain. NIST IR 7622 Supply Chain Risk Management Practices for Federal Information Systems. CNSSD 505, that is Committee on National Security Systems 505, Supply Chain Risk Management. ISO 28000, Specification for Security Management Systems for the Supply Chain. Supply chain risks: product tampering, unauthorized alteration of products during manufacturing, shipping, or storage, compromising safety, functionality, or integrity. Counterfeit products, fake or substandard components that may fail to meet specifications, leading to operational failures or security vulnerabilities. Malicious implants or hardware or software trojans, hidden devices, code or firmware intentionally inserted into products to create backdoors, espionage, or sabotage opportunities. Supply chain disruptions, delays, shortages, or quality issues from suppliers affecting delivery timelines and operations. Data security risks, exposure of sensitive information during transactions, communications, or integration with supplier systems. Non-compliance risks, suppliers failing to meet regulatory, contractual, or industrial standards, leading to legal or financial consequences. Operational risks, risks arising from accidental errors, process failures, or environmental and logistical issues that affect product integrity or supply chain performance. Supply chain risk mitigations, assessment and monitoring. Regularly evaluate suppliers and service providers for compliance with security policies, standards, and contractual obligations. Includes on-site inspections and document reviews to verify policies, processes, controls, and practices. Continuous monitoring ensures emerging risks are detected early. Third-party assessments can also be conducted to provide independent verification and additional assurance. Supply chain risk mitigations, minimum security requirements, set baseline security expectations for all suppliers and vendors, such as encryption, access controls, and patch management. Ensures consistency and reduces vulnerabilities across the supply chain. Supply chain risk mitigations, service level requirements, SLRs or SLAs, define expectations for performance, availability, and security in supplier contracts, provides accountability and recourse if standards are not met. Supply chain risk mitigations, Silicon Root of Trust, ROT, hardware-based security embedded in chips to ensure device integrity from the start, protects against tampering and unauthorized firmware or software modifications. Supply chain risk mitigations, physically unclonable function, PUF, unique hardware fingerprint that cannot be duplicated, used for device authentication and encryption. Helps verify authenticity of components and prevents counterfeits. Supply chain risk mitigations, software bill of materials, SBOM, a detailed inventory of all software components, libraries, and dependencies in a product. It enables identification of vulnerable or malicious components and supports patch management. Supply chain risk mitigations, acquisition strategy, a structured plan for procuring products and services that aligns with organizational objectives, mitigates supply chain and security risks, ensures quality, and optimizes cost, schedule, and performance. It includes supplier selection, risk assessment, contracting approach, compliance requirements, and ongoing monitoring to maintain supply chain integrity. Next is security awareness, education, and training. Security awareness, high-level communications such as posters, banners, flyers, emails, reminders, newsletters, blogs or website updates, seminars or webinars, and short awareness videos. Security awareness focuses attention on security and to influence behavior, example, phishing awareness, and it does not focus on skills. Should be reinforced at least once a year with testing to ensure users recognize common threats. It helps personnel understand their security responsibilities. It is often required by governance, regulations, and compliance frameworks. Security training, formal role-based instruction that teaches practical skills needed for specific job tasks according to the security policy. Role-based content, tailor training to specific job functions. It focuses on how to do security correctly, not just awareness. Examples include how to handle PII and what to do during a security incident or emergency. Security education, in-depth long-term learning that builds advanced knowledge and expertise for security professionals, goes beyond basic job requirements and daily work tasks. Example, college degrees, professional certifications. Focuses on developing future leaders, specialists, and experts in security. Methods to encourage security awareness and training. Security champions, a person or group that promotes security on behalf of management, reinforces both awareness messages and training practices, and acts as a local role model within teams. Then gamification uses games, quizzes, competitions, points, and rewards to make both awareness and training more engaging, improve participation, and increase knowledge retention. Program effectiveness evaluation, monitor participation in awareness and training programs, collect user feedback to improve content and delivery, observe behavior changes to see if awareness or training is influencing how users act. Metrics to measure effectiveness, these are only examples. Phishing click rates, training completion rates, and number of reported security incidents. Periodic content reviews, regularly update awareness and training materials to address evolving threats such as cryptocurrencies, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. Update content based on new policies, regulations, and security lessons learned. Improve delivery methods using user performance results, user feedback, participation levels, and assessment and test outcomes. And that is it for domain 1, guys. Next is domain 2. And I will see you soon in domain 2 video. Until then, take care. And if you like today's video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our videos. That helps us a lot. Thank you so much for watching. See you. Bye-bye.